Call Don right now, 682-1270.
News Talk 1270, KIML. Don Carpenter Show. Welcome back. It's 8:31, and I want to welcome back to the show a guest we had a few months back, and it was a really great interview. The president of American Commitment, Phil Kerpen. Good morning.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
It's a pleasure to have you back, and we're going to talk a little bit today about a little bit of a dispute going on in Congress right now. There's a bit of a disagreement over how Congress should handle their health care. So why don't we just give us a little bit of a background about this situation?
Yeah, when the Obamacare law was originally going through Congress in 2009 and 2010, one of the things that the American people were pretty insistent on was this idea that whatever Congress is imposing on other Americans, they ought to be willing to live with themselves, for themselves and their staff. And there was a provision, it was actually one of the only things in Obamacare that I like. There was a provision that was ultimately included in the law that dropped the previous health coverage that members of Congress and their staff had through the Federal Employee Health Benefits Plan and said, you're no longer going to get employer-provided coverage. Instead, you're going to have to go into the Obamacare exchange like anyone else who lost employer coverage, pay your own premiums, pay your own way, deal with all the problems associated with Obamacare, because if other people are going to be going through that, then you ought to, since you're the ones passing this law. And that language was included in the law. It's pretty unambiguous. But when we got to late 2013, 2014, and this language was actually about to take effect, and they were about to lose their taxpayer-provided health care from that FEHBP that they used to be in, there was a lot of hand-wringing and gnashing of teeth up on Capitol Hill, and staffers of both parties and members said we can't go through with this. We've got to do something. And what they ended up doing is there was a closed-door meeting with congressional leadership of both parties and President Obama himself personally, where they asked him to do something to prevent the law from actually taking effect as written. And the president did. He issued a regulation from the Office of Personnel Management that said that Congress and their staff would go into Obamacare, kind of. They would go into an exchange, but taxpayers would still pay for their premiums, 75% of the cost of their premiums like they used to in the old system. That money would follow them into Obamacare is what the OPM rule said. But they had a problem, Don, because there's no mechanism for an employer contribution in the regular Obamacare exchange. It doesn't exist because people who are in the regular Obamacare exchange are people who don't have employer coverage. There's no way for an employer to make a contribution. So the way they got around that is they actually committed, in my judgment, fraud. They filed documents that falsely certified that both the House and Senate were small businesses, and these are documents that say, under penalty of perjury, I certify that I have less than 50 employees. It actually said that there are 45 total employees for the U.S. House of Representatives. Somebody signed that declaration, and there was a second one that said there are only 45 employees in the entire United States Senate, and somebody signed that declaration. And then of these 90 employees of these two small businesses, 13,700 people signed up in the D.C. Small Business Exchange, getting their premiums paid for by taxpayers. And so Congress has contrived to circumvent the law that they themselves wrote, and they've done it by committing fraud, by filing false documents, certifying themselves as a small business, which, by the way, a lot of other large employers in this country would like to have that option, but they don't dare file false documents claiming to be small businesses.
Well, now, so they didn't even try to claim that each senator or representative's office was a separate small business. They actually just did the one small business for the Senate and one for the House. Is that how they did it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you can actually see these forms. We've got them linked on our website. If you go to AmericanCommitment.org and you link on the Stop the Washington Obamacare Exemption, you can see an image from the document, and if you want to see the full document, you can click and see the full document from Judicial Watch. We got these documents because Judicial Watch did a Freedom of Information Act request to the D.C. Health Exchange. When that was denied, they litigated it, and ultimately they obtained these documents. Now, we don't know who signed them because that's been redacted. It's been blacked out, but we do know that exactly what you said is correct. They did not claimed that individual offices were employers. They filed one form for the House, one form for the Senate, and they claimed that each was a small business. And it's interesting because the stories that came out when they were doing this had the version that you said. They say each office is going to claim to be a small business, but I think that they realized that was going to have even more problems because these offices don't have their own employee identification numbers. They don't run payroll. All of that is done by the Senate dispersing office and by the House equivalent. And so that would have been an even more extravagant fiction. But and I think for simplicity, they opted to just commit 2 acts of fraud instead of hundreds. But that's how they decided to do it.
Well, and I mean, I'm looking at it right now. I mean, it's pretty, literally black and white. Other than the red that you put in there for the emphasis. This is and this is something we always talk about how Congress should be bipartisan. Well, here's an example of Congress being bipartisan. Not such a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a huge mistake by Republicans to go along with this because even though it would have caused some economic pain for them personally if taxpayers were no longer paying for their insurance and for some of their top staff, for their staff that weren't getting the max salary, they would have been able to increase their cash compensation so they could be able to afford to buy the exchange plan. So the real people that this protects are the members themselves and their highest paid staffers, people whose cash compensation couldn't be increased. But to protect themselves and their highest paid staffers, Republicans basically let all the pressure off Democrats and the top Democratic staffers and the Democratic members. I mean, the whole reason this was such a good provision in the Obamacare law and such an important provision to actually implement and enforce is that if Democrats on Capitol Hill were personally feeling the pain of going into Obamacare, paying their own way, dealing with all the headaches and the rest of it, they would have a tremendous incentive to reopen the law and fix it, not just for themselves, but for everyone else in America. And when Republicans agreed to basically allow this escape hatch to do this sort of corrupt deal, relying on these fraudulent documents, they let all of that pressure off on Democratic staffers and Democratic members. And now the problem is fixed for them, but not for anyone else in America.
Well, and of course, I mean, I can imagine how miserable it would have been for the people that originally voted for the original Obamacare law. Maybe it wouldn't be miserable for them, but they go to work every day and their staffers are saying, look at what you did. This is killing us here in the office. But yeah, I think it's a huge, not only on the moral level, but it's a huge political mistake.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it was very short-sighted, and I think the right way to handle this was and they could still do this. This is the thing. Okay, this is a benefits policy of the House and Senate. They don't need legislation to change this. They don't need President Obama to agree. And Mitch McConnell and John Boehner, or one or the other, could come out tomorrow and say, we've changed our benefits policy. We're going to comply with the law, and effective whatever date I've instructed the Senate dispersing office to no longer make these illicit employer contributions available, and we're going to comply with the law. I mean, the idea that this would just continue to happen, and we've got Republicans making excuses for it. Even recently, we had a vote in the Senate Small Business Committee on an effort to subpoena these documents and find out exactly who signed them, to find out whose name is behind that redaction, so we could ask them, why did you sign it? Get to the bottom of this whole thing. Half the Republicans on the committee voted against it. Your own Senator Enzi voted against it, and so this is a real bipartisan kind of cover-up to a bipartisan fraud, and it's very bad politically for Republicans in particular because we expect this kind of behavior from Democrats. I mean, this is a president who routinely violates the law in all kinds of ways to advance his objectives, and so it's not surprising that Democrats would say, well, the law says this, but we prefer something else, so we're going to ignore the law. They've been doing that on immigration. They've been doing it on all kinds of other things in health care. They've been doing it at the EPA. I mean, that's sort of their mode of operation, but Republicans have been extremely critical of that. We've got all these Republicans saying, vote Republican because we'll restore the rule of law because we don't believe in governing the way Obama's governing. But then when it comes to their own personal health care benefits for themselves and members of their staff, they say, oh, yeah, come on, there's nothing wrong with us pretending to be a small business. I think it completely undermines that bigger message of criticizing this administration.
Well, and you know, I mean, it's easy to chalk this up as, you know, quote unquote establishment Republicans, but on that list of senators that voted against this, you know, releasing the subpoena documents, Rand Paul was on that list, which was shocking to me.
That was the most surprising to me also. Although, I mean, Jim Risch also voted no. He's a very strong conservative. So, I mean, it wasn't really an ideological vote. It was sort of a, you know, let's leave this alone. You know, we don't want to embarrass the leadership of both parties in the White House. They cut this whole deal kind of vote. And, you know, for Rand Paul in particular, that was very shocking because this is the guy who's running for president on a platform of defeat the Washington machine. That's his campaign slogan. And I don't know what's more Washington machine than this deal cut between leaders of both parties and the president himself personally to have taxpayers pay for their health care in contravention of what the law actually says. And the statement that Rand Paul put out was pretty baffling because he put out this statement that said, you know, I would rather amend the U.S. Constitution to require Congress to comply with all the laws. And, you know, I support that, you know. That's a wonderful idea.
That's fine.
But I don't understand how that's a reason to vote no on finding out who signed that document.
Well, and that's all well and good, but we all know how hard that is. I mean, this would be a relatively simple matter. All you have to do is, like you mentioned, they could completely reverse this tomorrow if they wanted to.
Correct. And I mean, even just issuing this subpoena, so let's say we find out what staffer signed that form. Do you think the staffer is going to say, oh, yeah, I committed fraud, arrest me? No, he's going to say, this is exactly who told me to sign it, this is how it was approved. And it would be very, very embarrassing for the leadership, probably of both parties. And so that's what that vote was about in committee. It was about not embarrassing the leadership of both parties that signed off on this by telling us, you know, who the staffer was, because all the reporters would go ask him, why'd you sign it? And so that's what that was about. And, you know, Rand Paul's constitutional amendment, whatever its merits, it's probably not going to pass. It's almost impossible to amend the Constitution for good or for ill. And so it was an excuse, in my judgment. And you know, the thing that upset me about Rand Paul's vote in particular is I really do expect better from him. You know, there are a lot of guys up there whose votes didn't necessarily surprise me. But he's somebody who I really expect not to go along with this kind of thing, and so it was disappointing.
Well, and so, you know, just so we, you know, don't neglect the four senators that did vote the right way. There were a few guys that are on the right side of this. Well, actually, five. It would be five.
Yeah. Well, the Chairman Vitter, who called for the vote, of course, voted for his own motion, and then the others were. It was interesting. Some of the newly elected ones, Joni Ernst from Iowa, Cory Gardner from Colorado, Tim Scott from South Carolina, all of whom just got elected. And who am I missing? Do you have a list?
Rubio.
Oh, that's right. And Marco Rubio. That's interesting. So you have a contrast there between two of the presidentials on this. And I don't think Rand Paul or Marco Rubio have been asked about this vote by the media yet, and so that it'll be interesting to see if it becomes an issue in the presidential campaign.
Well, I imagine you get them up on stage at the same time. Rubio might mention it if he's, you know, allowed a chance to address Rand Paul directly. I mean, if I were him, I'd bring it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be a very, very helpful issue for him to say, look, you know, I was willing to give up something that I benefit from personally and my staff benefits from personally because it's in violation of the law and because it relies on a fraud, and that's not the way I'm going to benefit myself. And I think that would actually be a very strong argument, not just on this issue, but sort of the principle of it. I think would resonate with people. And so, you know, I think he probably hasn't said much about the vote just because, you know, he's not eager to embarrass his own leadership more than anyone else is. But I think, you know, if he sort of looks at it in the context of the campaign, he could see that it could be a real advantage for him.
Okay, so I mean, you mentioned that this could be, I mean, like you said, this could be reversed tomorrow. They could forego this exemption tomorrow. I mean, where do you see it going from here?
Well, I don't think they're going to reverse it tomorrow, unfortunately. I will say that Senator Vitter, the same senator who forced that committee vote, is trying to get a Senate floor vote. And a Senate floor vote on this would be very, very interesting because, the level of attention and public awareness and media awareness of a floor vote is inherently much higher than a committee vote. And I think it'll be very difficult for a lot of Republicans to just quietly join Democrats in killing it if he does get a vote on the Senate floor. I think that would have real political impact on the people who vote against it. And so that's kind of the next thing to watch, whether he can succeed in getting a Senate floor vote. Of course, Mitch McConnell could block him from getting one. He has that power as Senate Majority Leader, but that would look very, very bad. And so I do think there's a decent chance that we'll see a floor vote on the Senate sometime soon, and that could be a big opportunity to shame these guys into actually ending this and following the law.
Well, it certainly it'll be an interesting thing to watch. And I know I haven't seen a whole lot of coverage besides from your organization. There hasn't been a whole lot of coverage for this, so it's certainly something that could definitely use the light of day to let people know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I will say there was a very good National Review article about a week and a half ago now that had a lot of original reporting and stuff that I didn't previously know. And so there are some reporters that are starting to look into this, and certainly not as much as I'd like, but we're not the only ones on this. And I think if there is a Senate floor vote, that will get a lot of attention. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Well, we're almost completely out of time, and it's been a pleasure talking with you. So if anybody's interested in learning more about this and maybe doing something about it, how can they get involved?
Our website is AmericanCommitment.org, and if you go there, there are a lot of articles that I've written about this. If you would just want to read the background information, you can click on issues and then click on healthcare, and they should all come up that way. You can also take action. We've got a form letter that you can edit as much as you'd like and send into Congress that asks sort of these specific questions that we've been talking about. And you can get to that right on the front of AmericanCommitment.org. It's not the top action item, but if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see it.
Okay, well, thank you so much again, Phil Kerpen, the president of American Commitment, AmericanCommitment.org. Thank you so much, and hopefully it won't be so long before we get a chance to talk to you again.
All right, sounds good, Dodd. Have a good one.
Thank you. And on that note, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. News Talk 1270 KIML.
Don Carpenter
is cooking
on News Talk 1270 KIML.